This video is brought to you by Battleaxe. There are two kinds of people watching this video. The first person is someone who uses solids in After Effects. Solid layers, adjustment layers, null objects, it's just part of working in After Effects and it really doesn't bother you. But the second kind of person really hates solid layers because they generate lots of clutter in the project panel. They create dependencies in comps and there's no convenient size or color controls. But this video and the freebie from Battleaxe that I'm gonna tell you about is made just for that person. So if that's you, stick around, and if it's not you, still stick around because you might learn why solids are kind of annoying sometimes. This is Void, the solids layer, and it can do a surprising amount of things, but let's jump into After Effects and I'll show you the basic functionality. So right here is the little script that has 3 different buttons on it. The first one is Void, and that's what I want to talk about first. If I come up to Layer, New, Null Object, that's going to generate a special layer in After Effects that actually is just a solid. If we take a look at the layer name, that's Null 4, that's right here. And if I drag this out into the comp, it looks different because it's actually just a solid. It's 100 by 100 pixels, but the way that After Effects generates it puts the anchor point in the top left corner, which is a little weird, but it's centered in the comp. And if I bring up the transparency, it doesn't allow me to increase or decrease the opacity. That's not really important. I just think it's interesting that when you generate the null, you can't change the opacity, but if you drag it into the comp from the solids folder, you can. Anyway, it's not great that it has to have that dependency of that solid, because if I were to delete that null, it's going to say, hey, are you sure you want to delete this? It's being used. And if I delete it accidentally, yeah, that null is gone. But if I click the void button in the void script, it's going to generate what looks like a null, except the anchor point is centered. And if we take a look at the effect controls, we actually have some pretty cool controls in here. This is actually a shape layer, and it's made to look a lot like a null so that you can continue using it the same way that you would use a null object. And if we look at the layers, you'll see the little guide icon is there. So if I right click and go to guide layer, that's enabled. That means that we'll be able to see it in the comp until we render, and then it won't be visible, which is exactly what you want with a null object. But in addition to that, we have these controls for the width and height right here as a pseudo effect. So I could make this a little bit larger in either direction, and I can also change the offset X and Y without changing the anchor point. And this is really useful for some specific scenarios, which we'll take a look at in a second, but this is basically replacing null objects. Think of void as the null replacer. Now we have 2 more buttons in here, so let me delete that void and we'll take a look at the next one, variant. This is the adjustment layer replacer. It's gonna make a shape layer the size of your comp. It's going to automatically turn on the adjustment layer switch, which is all an adjustment layer is. If I bring out this adjustment layer 1, it's a solid with that switch enabled. So we're removing the need for depending on that solid. We're creating a shape layer with that switch enabled. We've got an adjustment layer. All right, so the third button here is volume, and this is the solid replacer. When you click on it, it's going to bring up the color picker to allow you to choose a color that you want to make that solid. It'll default to this 80% gray color, and you can click OK or hit the escape key if you don't care about the color. But again, it makes it the size of the comp. It's a shape layer, so you can go on and change this to be whatever you want, but it replaces the need for that dependency on the solids folder. So at its core, that's what Void does. It replaces null objects, adjustment layers, and solid layers with voids, variants, and volumes. And you can create as many of these as you want just by clicking. You can change the color, hit OK, and that's great, but Void can actually do a lot more. So why don't I go ahead and jump over to my second example here, where I have this animation of a Christmas tree and the presents falling down and then wiping off the screen. Now I animated this using null objects, adjustment layers, and solids. But if I expand the Void script a little bit, you'll notice we have this replace section. Yes, Void can actually replace nulls, adjustment layers, and solids within your comp or your entire project with these simple buttons. So with this comp open, if I click on replace nulls in comp, the script runs and then gives me an alert letting me know how many layers have been replaced, 2 nulls, click OK, and everything about those 2 null objects has been preserved. So there were keyframes on it, the positioning is the same, all of the parenting, it's all matched up so that it's completely replaced now with shape layer based nulls rather than actual null objects that are based on solids. I can do the exact same thing for this adjustment layer right here. I don't even need it selected. I'll just say replace adjustment layers in comp. That is replaced with a variant layer. All the effects are transferred over, including some keyframes, and it looks exactly the same. Now let's do the same thing with this solid, which I'm using as a background here. I'll just say replace solids in comp. Not only does it replace it, it even keeps the same name. It adopts the color, so I know that's still the same medium yellow solid, except it's now replaced with volume. And I've been able to remove all of those dependencies from this comp. And if I jump back into my solids folder, there's less solids in here because it actually removes anything that can be as you're doing that, which is just another really great way to be able to start cleaning up your project files. And again, I could be doing this in either the comp that I have open or the entire project all at once. Now there are a few more really cool features of Void, specifically the null object replacer. If I select any one of these layers, so why don't we say this present right here, I'll lock that variant layer, I'll select that and then click on Void. It's going to generate that Void layer at the anchor point of the layer that I had selected and parent that layer to the Void layer. So it's just very quickly giving me the ability to create a controller for whatever I've selected. Again, if I select this star up here and click on Void, it's going to give me that Void layer now as the parent for the layer I had selected. But if I undo that and I actually select all of the presents, so why don't we go to where the animation is resolved, I'll select all 5 of these GIFs and click on Void. It's going to create a void in the center of all of those objects, again, based on the anchor point placement, and then that's going to be the controller for all of those layers. Not only that, it's actually trimmed the in and out points to the furthest point backwards in time of the layers you had selected and the furthest point forward in time of the layers you had selected. So it's going to trim it to whatever your selection was, which is really, really convenient. And if I jump over to this other comp right here, I'm gonna show you how Void can be really useful for creating controllers in character rigs. This is a little guy that I rigged up using rubber hose. Everything's parented up to the body and it's all ready to go, but I would like to have some hand controllers rather than just these little crosshairs. So what I'm gonna do is select one of them and click on Void, and that's going to generate that null, again, parenting the controller to it. But this is where these other controls come into play. I could make the width and height a little bit bigger. Maybe I'll say 150 by 150, so that's easier to grab. And do the same thing over here. I'll select that controller, click Void, 150, 150, and then we'll do the same thing for the feet. Now for feet, I like to have that encompass the entire foot layer. So what I'll do is increase the height to, again, 150, but I'll make the width, say 300, and then use the X offset to move it over a little bit so I know that's the part of the character that it will be controlling, that offset bit a little bit, while still preserving the anchor point where I want it to be. So I can lift up that leg and I can rotate it with the W key to switch the rotation tool. That's all gonna behave the way that I want it to. So let's do the same thing over here. Again, Void, I'll make it 300 wide by 150 tall and then offset the X to the right so that it just completely covers that foot. Finally, let's make a controller for the body. You see I moved the anchor point down to closer where his waist would be. I'll click on Void. I'll make it really big this time. Let's say 500 by 500. Offset the X, actually that's a little bit too big. Let's say 300 by 300 and reposition this off to the side. This way I can just quickly grab this controller off to the side without having to move my mouse over top of the character. And with all of those selected, I'll move them to the top of my composition and rename them. So this will be the body controller. I've got the left foot controller, that's his left foot. I've got the right foot controller, the right hand controller, and the left hand controller. Now that I have controllers for everything that I need to be able to control, I can take all of these other controllers like the wrist, shoulder, ankle, hip, and I can disable their visibility. I don't need to see them anymore. I'll leave them shied and I'll lock them. I'll also lock up these auto flops that are already hidden, lock all of my artwork layers, everything else is shied, so I can click on the shy switch and I'm left with my background and the controllers for the actual character rig. So I can move his body around very easily, rotate him around, I can grab his hand, move it up and down, all with these controllers that are nice and big, very simple and easy to read without any extra clutter. Now I just noticed I have a solid in the background, so why don't we say replace solids in comp. That will replace that with a volume layer. I'll go ahead and make that a guide layer because I don't want that to render when I put him into another comp, but I'll lock that and shy it. Another one of my favorite features of Void is the ability to use it as a zeroing tool, and I'll show you exactly what I mean by that. If I bring up all of the position properties for these voids, you'll notice that they are separated by default into X and Y dimensions. But every single one of these position values is unique, which makes sense. Every layer in After Effects has its own position value relative to the comp unless they're parented to something else. So if I were to say grab the body controller and I come over to the void button and I alt click, you see it says it's going to create and hide a void. Watch what happens. I'll alt click on it. A void has been created, but then it disappeared and nothing has really changed except the body controller's position value is now 0, 0. This is the neutral or zeroed out position for the controller now because it is parented to a void layer that we can't see anymore. The reason we can't see it is because void has automatically shied it and sent it to the bottom of the layer stack. So it's all the way down here. I don't need to worry about it because all it's doing is serving as that point of reference where the anchor point was for that existing layer and parenting that layer to it, which effectively zeroes out the position of that controller. And what that allows you to do is move this anywhere you want, and it doesn't really matter. I didn't have any keyframes set, so I need to get it back to where it was originally. But all I have to do in order to achieve that is now it will zero out the X and the Y position, and it's back to normal. So I can do the same thing for the hands. I'll alt click on the void button. Same thing over here. We'll do it for the feet as well. You see nothing is changing visually with what I have here, but if I press P, all of the position values are now 0. So I can move this around as much as I want and never worry about ruining that original neutral zeroed position. All I have to do is select all those control layers, zero out the X, zero out the Y, and we're back to normal. That, like I said, is one of my favorite features of Void and something I'm going to be using all the time with my character rigs. Now there is a drawback to using shape layers instead of solids in certain cases. So I'm gonna jump back over to this comp and I'll delete both of these and let's just make a new solid. Layer, new solid layer. Click OK, and then apply an effect like the grid effect, okay? Apply that there, and solids to After Effects are what are called footage items. I can scale this layer down, I can reposition it and rotate it, and that grid is going to stick with that layer as if it's just applied to it like a texture. But if I do the same thing to a shape layer, let me make a new volume. We'll make this one, say, this cyan color. Click OK and apply that grid to it. We're gonna get the same grid, but if I try to scale this down, rotate it, reposition it, nothing is happening to the grid because vector layers are treated differently in After Effects than footage items. That's what this little collapse transformation or continuously rasterized switch is telling us. If I were to continuously rasterize that solid, the exact same thing would happen. Position, rotation, scale, none of that is affecting the effects because a vector layer is being treated basically as a canvas the size of the comp. All the contents are ignored and that effect is not going to be seen by whatever transformations you apply to the layer. Now let me make one more volume and I'll show you another effect. Let's say the fractal noise effect. And this is going to behave slightly differently. You see that I can move this around like a window or a mask almost. So it's not staying the size of the comp, but it still is not respecting any of the position, scale, rotation that I'm applying to it. So if this is a deal breaker for you, we have provided a solution, but it is a little bit redundant. Let me show you what I mean. If I hold down Alt and click on the volume button, it's going to create that same volume layer, but it's going to automatically pre-compose it. And this is effectively turning it into a footage item. As long as you don't have this continuously rasterize, or in this case, collapse transformation switch enabled, I could apply the fractal noise effect, I could scale it down, rotate it, do whatever I want with the position, and that fractal noise is going to be stuck to the layer. Again, unless I collapse transformations, and then it goes back to behaving exactly the same way. This is no different than if it wasn't a shape layer inside of a pre-comp, but it does provide that fix to eliminating solids in your comp. The only issue is that now instead of solids, you're creating more comps. So it's really up to you. Is it really worth it to save on solids just to make more pre-comps? That's something you're gonna have to decide for yourself, but we wanted to give you that option if it's something that really bothers you. Now, hopefully I won you over and you want to install Void. So let me show you how to get this script installed in After Effects really quick. You're going to download this in the link in the description, but these are all the files you're going to get with it. We're going to take a look at the other files, but void.jsx, this is the script UI panel. This needs to go into your script UI panels folder for the version of After Effects you want to install it in. So on a Windows machine, that's going to be in your local drive, program files, Adobe, After Effects, whatever version you're using, support files, scripts, and then script UI panels right here. So you're gonna paste that void.jsx right into that folder, restart After Effects, and then it will show up in your window menu. You can go all the way down to the bottom. Obviously mine goes off the screen, but void.jsx shows up there. You click on it and it's gonna show up as a dockable panel that you can put wherever you want just by clicking and dragging it to your workspace. But if you don't always want to have void docked in your workspace, I understand, that's no big deal. We have created a Kbar solution for this. So if I bring up my version of Kbar, if you're not familiar, this is just a script preset expressions launcher. Basically, you can create buttons that do many things in After Effects, and we've created a void button as well. Now it's easier than ever to install a Kbar button because now we're able to actually just import it. So if I go back to this folder, you'll see there's a Kbar folder with a void.kbar file. So all you have to do to install it is come to Kbar and go to your Kbar settings. So let's go to Kbar settings, and this will bring up this menu. And here I have all the battle axe buttons. I'm gonna go ahead and just delete the void button, click OK. And then down at the very bottom, I'm gonna click on this menu and say import from Kbar file. And then you just need to navigate to where that file is. So here's the Kbar button. I'll click on open. It's gonna ask me if this is what I wanna import. I say sure, and there's my create void button, which I can now drag into my already existing Kbar menu. I don't actually need to keep this void toolbar, so I'll just delete that. Let's go delete. Okay. Close that out, and there we go. We've got a create void button right in the comp. Now I'm gonna delete this and click on it once to make a void layer. That's exactly the same, but we can use modifier keys on the keyboard to generate other types of layers. So with my mouse over that, if I hold the Alt or Option key on a Mac, this will switch to an A, letting me know that this is going to make an adjustment layer replacement, the variant layer. Or if I hold down Control or Command, that's gonna switch to S for solid. That's gonna create the same volume solid replacer alternative and behave exactly the same way. So I've got all three of those. But if I hover over this, you'll see that holding Shift will also open the void panel. So if I hold Shift, click on that, it's gonna make a non-dockable UI that allows me to quickly get to the replace functionality. So if you wanna be able to launch that very quickly without having to dock that actual script, there you have it. I'm telling you, that's going to be in my Kbar from now on. But there's one more feature of Void that I think you're going to like. If you're really into this, then there's a headless folder, and inside that folder are 3 different scripts: new variant, new void, and new volume. And the reason that these are all separated into their own scripts is because you can actually assign keyboard shortcuts to these headless scripts in After Effects, meaning you can replace the keyboard shortcuts for solids, adjustment layers, and null objects with voids, variants, and volumes. Let me show you how to do that. With all 3 of these selected, I'll copy, and then I'm gonna go to the scripts directory. Again, on a PC, that's under Program Files, Adobe, the version of After Effects you're using, Support Files, and then Scripts. I'm gonna paste these right into this folder and click Continue to allow me to put all these in there. Now that they're there, again, I just need to restart After Effects, so let me do that real quick. All right, I'm back. And if I go up to File, down to Scripts, they are going to be right here: Void, New Variant, New Void, and New Volume. Now I don't actually need to access them right there, but because they're installed properly, I can now come up to the Edit menu, down to Keyboard Shortcuts, and click on that and find my Keyboard Shortcuts Manager. Now all I have to do is search for Void and scroll down to find these scripts: New Variant, New Void, and New Volume. So if I want to assign the keyboard shortcut for New Solid to actually run this script, I just select it, click over here in the shortcut column, and press the keyboard shortcut, which is Control or Command Y. So I'll press Control Y. It's gonna say that's already in use for New Solid Layer. It's not gonna have a shortcut anymore, but that's okay. So New Void, this would be a null object. That's Control Alt Shift Y. And then New Variant, that is Control Alt Y. Now that I've assigned all of those, I can click OK, and let's clear out this comp one more time, and I'll press Control Y to make a new volume layer. That's great. I'll press Control Alt Y to make a new variant layer, and I'll press Control Alt Shift Y to make a new void. And just like that, I have assigned all of these keyboard shortcuts to allow me to create these shape layer based solutions rather than solids that After Effects defaults to. And I think that is absolutely fantastic. Now, like I said at the beginning of this video, this is absolutely for one type of person, and it's the type of person who doesn't need an explanation as to why this is a useful tool. If that's not you, I hope that this video kind of won you over and that you have a different opinion maybe on solids than you did before. If you still want to use solids, I'm not gonna hold that against you. I'm sure there will be solids in my future, but as often as I can, I'm gonna be using voids, variants, and volumes from now on. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this, please check out these other freebies that we have at Battleaxe, as well as the paid tools. They're all fantastic. So much time and effort has been put into these tools to make your life easier inside of After Effects and help you get your work done faster and more efficiently. And if you use any of these tools in your projects, be sure to tag us, both me at Jake in Motion and Battleaxe as a company at battleaxe.co. We love seeing your work and sharing it on social media, so don't be afraid to tag. Leave a comment down below letting us know what you think about Void, if there are any features that you think that could be added to it, or how you might be able to use it in a clever way that I haven't thought of yet. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe if you're not already so that you can always catch these freebies and other tutorials as I'm posting them. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.